Okay, magandang umaga. Ano bang oras dito sa Thailand? Ngayon ay alas 10. So first, I would like to make a minor correction. Although I lecture at Mahidol University, I'm currently based at Thammasat University. And apologies, I did not prepare any PowerPoint presentation, but I did prepare a written reaction for this forum. So I was asked by Dr. Ton Clemente to give a reaction focusing on the importance of having Filipinos in the Philippines and Filipinx-Americans in the US care about each other's issues. So as Filipinos in the Philippines, why is it important for us to care about the issues facing Filipinx-Americans in the US and vice versa? But before I share my views on this assigned reaction topic, please allow me to contextualize first what I mean by Filipino and how it relates to Filipinx Americans. Because as Ton knows, my background is history, so I would like to contextualize it first based on our historical development as a nation, as a people. So while present-day Filipinos come from various Austronesian ethno-linguistic groups, the name Filipino, as we all know, was derived from Las Islas Filipinas in honor of King Philip II of Spain. During the Spanish colonial period, the term Filipino was used for Spaniards born in the archipelago. It was the propagandist reformist like Jose Rizal who appropriated the word Filipino to refer to all inhabitants or all quote-unquote natives of the archipelago. The so-called Indios, Moros, y Infieles, so the Christians, the Moros, or the Muslims, and the non-Christian non-Muslims, or as Spaniards call them, pagans. The term Filipino wasn't immediately accepted and used by most Filipinos. So maybe Filipinx can learn something from that experience. Up until the 1930s, Tagalog or Taga-Ilog, people of the river, because most Filipino communities were founded and prospered near rivers and other water systems like Pampanga, Cebu, Tausug, etc., was preferred by the indigenous population. After the establishment of the Commonwealth of the Philippines in 1935, Filipinos gradually accepted and used the term Filipino to refer to themselves. So needless to say, when we refer to the Filipino term for Filipino, which is Filipino with letter P, we recognize Filipinos from different classes, ethnicities, religions, genders, sexualities, generations. So it's been said that the name Filipino is treated as gender neutral. Filipino women and members of the LGBTQIA plus community refer to themselves as Filipino. Filipino women also refer to themselves as Filipina or Filipina, but they have no issues or qualms in referring to themselves as Filipino. So just recently, the term Filipinx was introduced, initially applied only to those of Filipino heritage in the diaspora, used specifically or especially by the younger generations of the Filipinx-American community. But now, it's also being applied to all Filipinos within the Philippines and in the diaspora. But in reality, Filipinx isn't used by most Filipinos in the Philippines. It doesn't resonate with the Filipinos in the Philippines. We'll probably, if we use Dr. Enrique's category, we'll probably need to apply indigenization from without on Filipinx. But even then, we don't know if it will be accepted or rejected by Filipinos in the Philippines. It needs to be appropriated first by the Filipinos from the grassroots, from the ground. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. This brings me to a related question. How do Filipinos view Filipinx-Americans, and how do Filipinx-Americans view Filipinos? We obviously have not only a shared future, but also a shared present and a shared past. But we also are very, very different. Our histories might have converged at some points in space and time, but they also diverge in countless ways. While there are similar, for example, while there are similar authoritarian and extreme rightist challenges that we face in Rodrigo Duterte's Philippines and Donald Trump's America, there are also a lot of differences, especially in terms of the everyday experiences, everyday struggles of our peoples. From the perspective of the Filipinos in the Philippines, regarding our idea of shared future with Filipinx-Americans, we may ask, are Filipinx-Americans part of the Filipinos' intra-indigenous dialogues, or are they part of our inter-indigenous discourses? When we say intra-indigenous, we treat the Filipinx-Americans as part of us. But when we say inter-indigenous, you look at Filipinx-Americans as someone outside of us. So to the Filipino sarili or self, are Filipinx-Americans kapwa, fellow or shared self, or are they other or iba, or both? I've always believed that Filipinx-Americans are both kapwa and iba to the Filipinos in the Philippines. And it's from being kapwa and iba that we derive our answers to the main question I earlier mentioned as posed by Dr. Clemente. Why is it important to have Filipinos in the Philippines care about issues facing Filipinx-Americans in the US and vice versa? Because Filipinx-Americans are kapwa. We share some aspects of our histories, our cultures, our languages, our psychologies with Filipinx-Americans. A lot of Filipinos, as shared by the panel from DOPA, have Filipinx-Americans as family members, relatives, and friends. And aside from that, we have comparative, as I mentioned, we have comparative challenges in the face of authoritarian and extreme rightist governments of Duterte and Trump. We are all exploited and gutted by global capitalist system that perpetuates anti-environment, classist, racist, sexist, and ageist structures in our societies. So while there are differences, and Filipino Americans or Filipinx-Americans are also iba or other, they are also our kapwa-tao, our fellow human being. When caring, we don't limit ourselves to people we have direct or comparative connections to. Because we are makatao or humane or pro-people, all those who are different with us, all those who are different from us, all those who are iba, in the end, are all our kapwa-tao. We need to care about each other's issues because as Filipinos and Filipinx-Americans that aspire to live up to being makatao, we practice pakikipagkapwa-tao or humane relations with fellow human beings by recognizing both our shared identities and our diverse identities, and more importantly, fighting for karangalan or dignity, katarungan, justice, and kalayaan, freedom for all, as espoused by Dr. Enriquez. And maybe, as elaborated by Dr. Clemente, fighting for a magandang buhay. So, thank you.